about me, which I think I have in common with a lot of other Warhammer fans, is that I love toys. In fact, before I worked at Games Workshop, I used to work in a toy shop up in Aberdeen, and even though I was overworked and underpaid and Christmases always sucked and I was really sick of hearing the song Let It Go from the movie Frozen, I still loved it and it was kind of a dream job because I just got to see cool toys every day. But these days, as fans of both Warhammer and cool toys and action figures, we are thoroughly spoiled. Now there's tons of official Warhammer toys just readily available in stores and on the internet, which I think is extremely awesome, and you'd never find this much stuff if you googled Warhammer toys like 10 years ago. It's wild. So obviously I have a bunch of them in my collection already, both big and small. And whilst the factory paint jobs on these toys tend to range from kind of okay to actually pretty good, whenever I get one, I always have the unholy desire to just fully repaint it. And whilst I love painting the McFarlane scale Space Marines, my all-time favourite Warhammer toy to paint are these little guys here. They're the Warhammer Chibi range from Bandai, and unlike things like the Warhammer Funko Pop range, which I do not like, I think they look really weird, they are actually really well designed and sculpted, so when you paint them up like Warhammer miniatures, they actually end up looking really good. A while ago, I managed to get my hands on some of the new series of chibis, and I ended up getting duplicates of my two favourites, which are this Crimson Fist from the cover of Rogue Trader, and this cute little witch huntery looking Inquisitor lady. Now, usually when I'm painting these toys, I like to add a bit of an old school flair to them, and do little details which are a nod to the artwork found in Warhammer's original rulebook Rogue Trader. So this week, I thought I would challenge myself to do the seemingly impossible, and attempt to reimagine John Blanche's grimdark 80s Rogue Trader OC, Obiwan Sherlock Clouseau, into a cute little anime chibi. Because why the not? Whoosh, whoosh. So in order to fully pull off this weird vision I have in my head, I'm gonna have to do a few things first. Firstly, I'll have to add a little bit of imaginative colouring to the original artwork of Obiwan Sherlock Clouseau from Rogue Trader, and then incorporate some of the more recognisable elements from the artwork into this very, very different looking miniature to pay homage to the OG. Also, if you can spell Clouseau in the comment section without googling it, then congratulations, because you are officially smarter than I am. After that, all I have to do is work out how to paint a cute face on this large, smooth, blank canvas without it looking like a hideous hellspawn abomination from whatever depth of the warp anime lovers go to when they die. And to start with, I need to make a bit of a confession. I haven't actually painted a huge amount of Lady Warhammer miniatures in my life. I know. I'm sorry. I've done a fair few here and there over my many years of painting, but I've never done like a massive squad of sisters or anything that numerous. However, I have painted a lot of lady toys in my life. Let me explain, please. Before I did Warhammer, I used to do doll repainting, where I would take a store-bought doll, remove its factory makeup, and give it a brand new face. And yes, they do look a little bit creepy and weird, but this is a Warhammer hobby channel, not the I'm not a creepy weird person convention, so whatever, I think they look cool. So whilst I'm not massively versed on painting female Warhammer faces in the same way I am Space Marine and Orc faces, I do feel a little bit better prepared than I could be if I wasn't a weirdo in my teenage years. But saying that, it has been like 11 plus years since I've repainted a doll, so I think I'm gonna have to do a bunch more up-to-date research, but more on that when we get round to doing the face. For now, let's focus on something I've been really looking forward to doing, and that is some good old-fashioned colouring in. A lot of the time before I undergo a particularly dedicated painting project like this one, I will mock up a Photoshop version of the miniature itself to kind of plan out my colours before I start going hard on the paints. But in this case, I thought I'd do something a little bit different from just photoshopping the miniature, and instead do a full recolor of the original artwork that I'm basing the miniature on. The original piece of art is a fan favourite depiction of a typical Inquisitor from Rogue Trader, and he is hilariously cited as being named Obiwan Sherlock Clouseau. And he looks an awful lot like he is just John Blanche in a fedora and a trench coat, which is obviously an absolutely stellar design choice from the 80s Games Workshop team, so fair play. I decided that I would try and keep the colours pretty simple for once, and I quite like the kind of silvery light gold which the original Chibi's factory paint job has, so I kept that in for the armour, and I mixed it up with a classic red and black inquisitorial coloured jacket, simple leather accessories, and some copper and gold accents to differentiate the other details from the light gold armour. Once I was done, I accidentally started to get too into it, as I tend to do with these things, and I made him look like he was the main character in an 80s Rogue Trader themed horror computer RPG. And is this a spoiler for an upcoming video? A little bit, yes. Yes it is, maybe. Yes. But with all of my goofing around done, it was time for me to start painting the actual miniature itself. Or the toy. You know what I mean. If you've never painted a Warhammer toy like this before and you clicked on this video looking for some tips and tricks, then you have come to the right place. The first and most common question I get about painting Warhammer toys is, do you need to prime them? And I would say yes, you probably do. The raw plastic on these type of toys are usually quite hydrophobic. In 2024. Couldn't be me. And if you try painting over the factory paint job with your usual thin paints, it can get a little bit frustrating and they will just like form little droplets and drip off. It's no good. However, primer works wonderfully over these toys, and I started like I would any painting project with a coat of regular old Chaos Black primer. From there, it's just like painting an actual Warhammer miniature, but just a whole lot bigger than you're probably used to. But this can be a good thing though, as you don't necessarily need to do things like make your edge highlights as super tiny as you would if you were painting a 28 or 32 scale miniature. I feel like you can have a bit more fun and relax more when you're painting larger scale minis, and that's one of the reasons I love painting these larger scale toys. And speaking of painting larger scale miniatures, it's time for a word from our sponsor, who today is me, but specifically the mayor of Rascaltown, who is also me. Rascaltown is my own miniature range composed of adorable, if somewhat gribbly, larger scale goblin miniatures, all designed by yours truly, which I personally think are the best fun to paint and which I have done some of my best painting work on ever. They're each absolutely adorable and packed full of character and details, and we have quite a good little range going now, from knights to pirates and even fun scenery sets. So head on over to roguehobbies.com to check them out and maybe even give one its new forever home. Aww. Thank you very much. Back to the video. As I was cracking on with this miniature, I realised that I had accidentally fallen into an unfortunately familiar and completely unintentional pattern, which I tend to do a lot on this channel of mine, and I had mocked up another miniature full of things that I am not good at painting, and in this case about 60% of the miniature is the bane of my existence, non-metallic metals. And yes, it was my choice to do this miniature in non-metallics because I want to get better at it and I'm constantly trying to practice wherever I can, but I kinda didn't realise how much of it I would end up doing here. On top of that, it seems like I decided to put every single flavour of metallic into the mix, from the bright silvery gold on the armour to iron on the elbows and gun casing, gold on the trim, and even copper on the weapons and the shoulder pads. I had never tried to do non-metallic copper before, but I was actually pleasantly surprised with how well it turned out. It's not perfect by any means, and it probably looks a little bit more kind of yellowy, bronzy, brassy than copper, because I think actual copper has a lot more pink in it, but either way, I don't think I did too bad at all for my first attempt. After I got all the non-metallics out the way, the only other bit I really struggled with was the big leather witch hunter's hat. I'm not great at painting leather, and this was like a big chunk of leather, so it took me a little bit of time blending in some purpley tones in the shadows into lighter yellowy tones in the highlights, and I was a little bit worried at this point that I'd done my usual trick of overthinking things and then over-highlighting the miniature. But I forgot about, and then obviously remembered, my secret weapon for painting leather, which is just one single thin glaze of Gore Grunter fur contrast paint. I swear that you can just paint leather as atrociously as possible, and this one sick trick will literally just fix it and make it look amazing. Also, adding micro scratches all over your leather works wonders too for making it look like it has an actual texture and maybe distracting from the kind of not so good paint job underneath. I did my little scratches just using some lighter hobgrotty hide sort of colour, so there's some top tips for you if you're like me and you're bad at painting leather. Like I said before, painting pretty faces on pretty ladies is nothing new to the miniature painting scene, and I follow a lot of people who are extremely good at it and produce some absolutely gorgeous results, like these very talented miniature painters here. But a lot of these models that they're painting don't really look like mine. The miniature I'm painting is a chibi style miniature, which is supposed to look a lot more cartoony and cute, with its big old head and its freakishly small proportioned body. But so far I'd kinda gone against that on the rest of my miniature anyways, and I'd painted a fairly realistic looking miniature with lots of highlighting and shading, so what was I supposed to do to keep it on theme with the rest of what I've painted, but also make it look cute? Should I give it a realistic face and give it human eyes and a human mouth, and give children and innocent babies who casually enjoy Warhammer content on YouTube nightmares? No. Leave those babies be. I tried to Google my miniature followed by the word repaint to see if anyone else had tried to repaint this mini so I could kind of see what they had done with it. And I found a few cute looking sister chibis from the previous series, but I couldn't find anyone else who had done the witch hunter, so that was a bit of a dead end too. I decided instead that I would take some more inspiration from things like other chibi style toys, but especially Nendoroids, which are often similarly proportioned cute anime style collectibles. They have faces which are simple but have these nice soft features and colourful but detailed gradients in the eyes which look really nice. And after mocking up something similar on my tablet, which did look a little bit goofy but I didn't outwardly hate, I reckoned I would finally take the plunge and give it a go on my miniature. I did some super subtle shading and highlighting on the face, like literally two colours really carefully blended together, and then I put the eyes slightly higher up on the face than I did in my mock-up, because even though this is a chibi, I don't really want it to look like a full-on battle baby. I feel like that would be weird. And since the area I was working on is a little bit bigger than your typical Warhammer size face, I honestly didn't struggle that much. I did a light sketch first so that the eyes wouldn't be wonky, and then I filled them in and even managed to do a pretty blue to green gradient in each eye with some sparkly white highlights to finish them off. After the eyes were done, I was feeling more confident, so I decided to put in a bunch more characterful details on the face, like freckles, a little imperial eagle tattoo, and some nasty looking battle scars to toughen her up a bit, which is something I always love putting in on my human miniatures because it is a grimdark future after all. After all of the hard bits were out the way and I'd done all the other little details and pieces around the miniature like the hair and the power sword, but also especially the power sword because I love doing power swords, they're my favourite. It was time to do what is another one of my favourite things to do when I'm painting old school miniatures and do all those little rogue tradery details which harken the piece back to the original artworks. Honestly, apart from being a girl who looks nothing like John Blanche and who doesn't even have a beard and also who is a tiny little anime looking chibi, this miniature already has a bunch of things which kind of liken the miniature to Obiwan Sherlock Clouseau's artwork, like the big hat, the long cloak, and the weird little waist corset thing, and leather boots and gloves. All I felt like I had to do to make this really read as a homage to the original artwork was to add in some very distinctive of Obiwan Sherlock Clouseau details. Firstly, that iconic yin and yang symbol, which has absolutely no business being on any kind of Warhammer design whatsoever, but is also just so very, very Rogue Trader. To my delight, the miniature already has a little round crest right where the symbol is in the artwork, so I just had to paint over the little skull in the middle and replace it with the symbol, and it looked great. Then it was time for all of those classic checker marks, but firstly there's this decorative little band around his hat, which I think may be a rope or something like that, but I'm just gonna paint it like it's a hazmat sort of diagonally slashy pattern, which I think looks close enough to the original artwork. Obi-Wan also has a long coat and not a cloak like my miniature does, so I decided to just put the classic checkered pattern at the bottom of my lady's cloak instead, because again, it's close enough and it still definitely does the job. Then when all of the good bits were done, it was time for me to, as per usual, have a massive struggle doing the base and repaint it 3 times and finally settle on something incredibly simple and call the miniature done. And here she is! Obiwan Sherlock Clouseau is ready to put the cute in cute hammer, and probably also put a holy bullet sent straight from the Emperor himself into the chest cavity of any heretic. But also, just look at how cute she is. Doing this little, more scenic looking photography session with her was so fun as well, and I think she turned out great, especially against all odds her face, which doesn't at all look cursed or monstrous. Yay! I absolutely love doing fun little Rogue Tradery style miniatures, and I think that these little chibis really suit the style so well. And even though it's a little bit unusual, I really recommend picking one up yourself and giving it a go. They're great for practicing painting skills that maybe you're not super comfortable painting at a tiny scale yet. They're awesome little palette refreshers, and when they're finished, they really stand out and look like a great, albeit adorable, little Warhammer squad. And I'm afraid that is all we have time for today. As usual, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for being rogues. I'll see you in the next one. Bye! Bye bye!